But I wanted to tell everybody before we start, I wanted to remind you that we would love and we would need for you to possibly think about being a member. I am hearing. So I'll keep going. Can you hear me twice, Al?
Yes, I am hearing you twice, but it's a pleasure to be able to hear your dulcet tones again and again.
I'm just twice as nice. There we go. So we would love for everybody who's listening to us or listening to the recording of this to join us at the museum, literally join us as a member. It's a $49 a year membership. And for that, we're going to send you 70 free links of curated, wonderful, licensed, old-time radio clips, some of the best that Carl Amari has curated and has donated for us. And these are free classic radio shows. You'll be able to download them and hear them and listen to them. It's $49. It's about $140 value, and this will also help us to keep running, to keep going, to keep doing things. We're building some of our exhibits online, and we could certainly use your membership and your help. And one of those exhibits that we are building online is something we call the Great Debates. And the Great Debates is actually going to be talking about something that Al and I have been talking about the last 2 weeks, the impact of the broadcast medium on the presidential election. And what we're focusing on is really focusing on nowhere is it more clear that the broadcast medium, really the broadcast mediums or media, there we go, I was not pluralizing, as in radio, television, and digital, really affects how people see the presidential broadcast. We know the very first one with Kennedy and Nixon really changed the way people looked at things, because those who watched Kennedy were sure that he won on television. Those who listened thought Nixon did a better job. And as a result, political candidates did not touch debates for 16 years. So we went through a number of those last week, and now we're coming up to 1984, where Reagan and Mondale were debating one another. And I thought maybe that Fritz, thank you, Fritz Goldman, who is our engineer today and always and forever in our hearts. Would you please possibly play that clip for us? We want to see how Reagan and Mondale, I think this is going to be a clip that is going to pertain to our two presumptive candidates who are in their 70s.
Working out there for 2 or 3 weeks and cast it specifically in national security terms. You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
The actor at his absolute best.
If I still have time, I might add, Mr. Truitt, I might add that it was Seneca or it was Cicero, I don't know which, that said, if it was not for the elders correcting the mistakes of the young, there would be no state.
Mr. President, I'd like to head for the fence and try to catch that one before it goes over, but I'll go on to another question.
There we go. You're right. The actor and the great communicator.
The great, absolutely. And I think, by the way, it was Cicero, unless I'm way off. I think it was Cicero who said that. And point of fact, Cicero talks about the need for age in leadership, that age is a requirement, that we need experience, that life is lived. And so you have to live some of life in order to offer leadership in life. And Reagan was a surprise. And I've been reading the presidential, background of all the presidents. And he became a president almost by accident. I mean, a turn here and a turn there, and it didn't work out in California, been over. But he was an actor. He understood he was on the stage, and he played that. I was going to quote Marshall McLuhan to say the media is the message, but it's even more basic. It's knowledge is the message. And the media just broadcasts it in a broader range, so everybody hears the same thing at the same time and is influenced by that. But he knew that you needed humor. He knew what he knew. People say they were simple. No, he was a person with a couple of simple ideas, and that was about the economy and not necessarily about foreign policy. But of course, the joke is, without him, like Nixon, what he did in regard to China, that he brought down that wall. He was part of that process that brought down that wall. And they fell into it by mistake, but they did it, and they did it by communicating to each other. They wound up liking each other and believing each other because Reagan came across as believable.
Well, and one of the things that it really shows to me too, when we were talking last week about Kennedy and Nixon and how Nixon had first, it takes practice to be a good speaker. It takes practice to be a good communicator. You really do have to practice. What is my quip here? What is my line? And if you're a good leader, you're listening and you are also presuming, where are they going to get me? So he knew very well. So this is the beginning of a kind of an era where they're watching the debates, they're watching the stump, they are prepping each other to figure out, or their teams are prepping candidates to say, he's going to ask you this. How are you going to answer?
Right. This is not an academic debate. This is not two academics getting up there and saying, my position is A, and the other person says, well, my position is A prime. Each will give a critique of A and A prime, but will not try to one-up each other. This is a political game. Who's going to look best? And the first one to fall is the first one to lose.
So we have somebody asking a question online, asking, who do you think, they want to know from Al, who do you think is maybe the funniest and most charming president?
Oh, that's a tough one. The funniest, charming is tough. Funniest is easy. Barack Obama went out to comedians to work with comedians. He understood the purpose of comedy. His last speech at the Washington News Club was absolutely brilliant. Now, it was written by somebody else, but delivery. He worked at that, and he was very good about that. Charming is hard. I don't know. I think, actually, a recent president, I think Mr. Carter was charming because he may have been inept as a president or didn't fulfill the things he wanted to fulfill. But he's been certainly the most charming ex-president we've ever had.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next one because this one, I think, there's absolutely no charm here.
Okay.
This is a 1988 clip from Bush and Dukakis's debate.
To respond. Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life. I don't see any evidence that it's a deterrent, and I think there are better and more effective ways to deal with violent crime. We've done so in my own state, and it's one of the reasons why we have had the biggest drop in crime of any industrial state in America, why we have the lowest murder rate of any industrial state.
Well, his mistake is the following. I love my wife. I adore my wife. My wife is the center of my life. To live without her would be unbearable if she died for any circumstances. But I must tell you, as a politician, as a leader in the society, I need to hang on to my basic principles and not shape them to my personal needs and predilections. That's all he had to say. He just came out as a bureaucrat and said, "Of course not. No. Next."
Right. And that is, I had a sister who was a sister. I still have a sister who's wonderful and amazing. I have two sisters. One of them has worked in politics, and she's always said that it's your job, if you're working with a candidate, to keep going at them, get to say things in a way that not only appeals on a political level but on a heart level.
Right.
So because we do judge people with feeling and emotion, and we talked about this briefly last week. I don't necessarily know that that's all bad. I do think there has to be substance with people, but whether you're judging them just by emotion, I mean, there is some emotion.
It's both. I mean, I've been reading a book on love. I'm hoping to be able to practice the art before I die. And one of the things they talk about, we talk about love in so many different ways, and there's a sexual, there's an emotional, there's an intellectual. You want all three.
Right.
I mean, you don't want just, if you wanted just an automaton who knew his stuff, then Dukakis or Jimmy Carter were your man. Jimmy Carter was a reader of documents. He was a politico. He understood the game. He didn't understand the game of playing bad politics, but he understood what leadership was about. And he went at it, but he was like talking to an automaton so many times, except the one beautiful speech that he made, and everybody thought he was out there in fairyland. What a joke. He makes this one beautiful speech about the moral equivalent to war, and they poo-pooed him off as being an academic.
And that is mainly because I think because he wasn't connecting. He wasn't connected prior. Right. You have to build that relationship up with people. Right. And so I think to demand that our leaders, the person, the man, the woman who is going to lead the free world here in the U.S., be a communicator, be somebody we can be.
That's right. You're a public agent.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think very often we're talking about, it's we're talking about charisma and appeal, and that is not a bad thing. Falling in love with a candidate is not a bad thing, as long as you also believe. What's going on here? I'm looking here. Okay. I'm getting a question. Do you feel it would have been okay for Dukakis to say the question was inappropriate? And that it was
the question he may have said, "I love my wife," and it's perhaps inappropriate for ask this right now. But after all, you're playing for the president of the United States. What's not sacred grounds here? Oh, we're not going to mention Mr. Trump's allegations of sexuality. Well, yeah, we are, I guess, this next time. But he could have said that perhaps you were too close to the bone on that, and that was unfair. Maybe. But I think he had to begin with, "I love my wife."
And I think what angers me lately is the attacks on the press. When you go into a news conference, the president, other people have been in news conferences, and I just think it's very clear that level of anger that they level at the press, that's an act too. That is an act. They know that there's going to be an adversary. There's never been a warm relationship, and there is not supposed to be. The whole idea is I am not supposed to make you comfortable while I'm in the media. I'm supposed to ask you questions.
Well, be careful here. FDR brought them in twice a week into his office, and he's sitting down at his desk, so he's in a position of power, and he played with them. But he was also building up rapport with them and didn't lie to them. And they didn't. But there was what happened was a certain amelioration. We won't ask you this if you don't do this to us. But they built up a relationship, and it worked.
It does. The relationship is really important, and the relationship should go both ways, and there should be respect both ways. Let's go. I love the era where we begin discussing the debate online. While the debate is going on. We don't wait for the pregame. We don't wait for the postgame. We begin. And you know what, Fritz, if you can, do you think you might be able to go to the horses and bayonets clip as we're running a little bit late? But I think nowhere is it more key than during the Obama-Romney debates.
Yeah.
Because these things began to trend on Twitter. Obama was great on social media. Romney was really getting it as well. But I think Obama really ruled the roost when it came to social media. And so there was this sense again of understanding what was going on, understanding what the questions would be, and preparing for it.
And being alive. Remember, in the first debate, he was flat and lost.
Totally.
So there's also this energy, Here's an example of what I mean. Whether you like Jerry Seinfeld or not, look at the Seinfeld new release on Netflix. He's doing something more with himself than ever, and you believe him. And he's doing a slightly different kind of comedy. But what he brings to the stage is believable.
I don't think we're going to get to that clip.
It's something that I proposed. It's something that Congress has proposed. It will not happen. The budget that we're talking about is not reducing our military spending. It's maintaining it. But I think Governor Romney maybe hasn't spent enough time looking at how our military works. You mentioned the Navy, for example, and that we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military has changed. We have these things called aircraft carriers where planes land on them. We have these ships that go underwater, nuclear submarines. And so the question is not a game of battleship where we're counting ships. It's what are our capabilities? And so when I sit down with the Secretary of the Navy and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we determine how are we going to be best able to meet all of our defense needs in a way that also keeps faith with our troops, that also makes sure that our veterans have the kind of support that they need when they come home. And that is not reflected in the kind of budget that you're putting forward, because it just doesn't work.
All right.
And you know, we visited the website quite a bit, and it still doesn't work.
So there you go, horses and bayonets. And when he mentioned it, began trending, which meant he had a team ready.
He had a team ready, and that's a new, and perhaps if this was a college debate, we wouldn't allow that because it's extraneous.
Right.
But he had that set up. He was gonna take him to the Woodhouse, and he did take him to the Woodhouse.
Right.
And because he was president, he got away with it in a certain way. But you know what? I thought that was a bit vainglorious on his part.
Do you really? And so let me ask you then, do these debates, and this is a question coming from one of our viewers, do these debates really actually educate us as voters, or are they really a personality contest? And who prepare the most? I mean, what is it, an educational experience?
Well, for me, let me answer personally. By the time we get to the presidential debates between the final candidates, I've been through months and months of information, so on and so forth. So the debates for me either confirm or disconfirm my beliefs. But then it's another performance. Then I want to see, how do you act? How do you prepare? How do you find out who's the best gun in town? We got to have a gunfight sooner or later, right? And so I think you need to have that gunfight. And I'm surprised that sometimes they're not better prepared. I would suggest that the debate between Obama and Mrs. Clinton the first time, pretty impressive on both. They came out there shooting, and they both look really, really good in that. And that's really possible. Where the debates between Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Trump were damaged goods for a lot of reasons. Perhaps we could examine that next time. So
yeah, we can, but maybe we can take a quick look at one of them. I think we have a couple quick clips. There we go. The 2016 Clinton-Trump debate. You're so right. It became nasty, and in so many ways, this clip shows the literal form of it.
Fund. That's part of my commitment to raise taxes on the wealthy. My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund by making sure that we have sufficient resources. And that will come from either raising the cap and or finding other ways to get more money into it. I will not cut benefits. I want to enhance benefits for low-income workers and for women who have been disadvantaged by the current Social Security system.
So there's just that snipiness, the nasty woman, as well as the snipe on Donald. It's devolved.
Now, without giving away too much of my politics, one of my major complaints with Mr. Trump is his lack of gravitas as a president and his demeanor. He uses language, a vocabulary, facial expressions, and his general physicality in a way that's simply not appropriate for a commander-in-chief of a major nation, or perhaps not even a CEO of Duty, Daddy, and Doe, a small company. I find him, he doesn't play by the rules, which is an advantage for him because everybody else is playing by the rules. Right. But I find his physical stature and his use of language and his rebuttals demeaning for the office of the presidency.
I think it one of the things that my parents always taught me was, and we had to, growing up, we had to watch always the acceptance speech at the Democratic convention. We had to watch the acceptance speech at the Republican convention, and then we always, every year, had to watch the State of the Union.
Yeah. And
we now my dad was a political reporter at the Chicago Daily News. He refused to vote in primaries to declare a party because he thought that would be wrong as a political reporter. And so, but we knew his political views around the House. And when we were sitting watching the State of the Union, we would say, as good children do, but I thought you didn't like him. And my father would always say, he is our president. He demands our respect. He is our leader. It doesn't matter who we voted for. This is the person in office.
That's right. I agree with that, and I'm not suggesting anything different from that. I'm just talking about as a debater, Mr. Trump breaks the rules. As a public performer, Mr. Trump bends the rules. And the reason he does, because he can. And by the way, to be truthful, it's been very effective in regard to the voting population. Extremely effective.
Well, I think that attitude goes to the press corps, and they're treating him that way as the president, and then he's not treating them in the other. So it's not a quid.
To say to them that you're a stupid reporter to ask that kind of stupid question. That's a quote. And I'm not talking about my politics right now. I'm talking about, do you really want your physician to come in and say, yeah, you got cancer, pay your bill as soon as you can? No.
Okay, the timing on that one is really good. So, what we're going to do is we've invited Al back because what we want to do is we want to also talk about what's coming, meaning what do we think is going to be happening in this pandemic era when we have Biden and Trump, and have all of the debates, the primary debates that we've seen, have those, especially between all the Democratic candidates ad nauseum, has that set the stage for this? So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, and how this affects how this affects people. But we wanted to promo that for next week. We also want to tell you that we are doing a show on Friday as well on Instagram called Real Drama with Aileen Bishop and Olivia Jackson. They are going to be discussing the history of reality shows and competitions this Friday, 5:30, and we're very excited about that. And we're going to move on because we started a little bit late, but we like to finish on time. We like to be people of our words, and so we'll have Al back again. And I think though that I just wanted to take one personal moment. So last night, a colleague of mine died of cancer, lung cancer, Zay Smith. Fritz, if you could put that picture up, that'd be great. He not only was a colleague, he was actually my first husband. And he's the father of my two wonderful boys, Bryant and Zachary. And Zay was not only a beautiful writer and a beautiful reporter, he was an investigative reporter as well. He worked on the series The Mirage with Pam Zuckman that was on 60 Minutes as well, aired on 60 Minutes. And he leaves a real legacy of journalism. He taught at the Medill School of Journalism, but he also leaves a real legacy of how to be a wonderful father. He has two wonderful boys who last night were able to sit with him. And during this pandemic, the fact that we were able to hold his hand was a beautiful moment where we told stories for about 2 hours last night. And then he left us. And how wonderful it was to be with him, and how wonderful it is to be able to celebrate the people that we love, the people that we care about. There are so many people dying now, and it's very hard not to stop every once in a while and feel overwhelmed by it. But I want to thank you for letting me talk about one person, and I can't wait to continue to talk to everybody next week because I'm very excited about getting a little bit deeper into what the future is going to bring. So thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we will see you next week at our happy half hour. If I could say it, it would be really good. Should have thought of that when we made up the name. Can the host actually say it? So we will see you Tuesday at 5:30 next week. Thank you so much.